Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9, not 8, 9 of Down the Pub podcast, the podcast where we bring you the conversation you end up having at the pub after you've exhausted all of the much more interesting avenues. Brought to you by Wolves of Westminster. I am obviously your host, Peter Simpson, runner of the Haryan Gláeddyv channel and contributor to Wolves of Westminster. I'm joined once again today by the editor of Wolves of Westminster, Patrick Timms. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, sir.
So, today it's been another crazy week with a whole load of new news and barely any of it good. I think everyone's getting fed up with that, but oh well, we'll get over it. First things first, more budget news. It's all over the place. Apparently, we were going to get some 2% rise in income tax. That was going to be evened out by a downward spiral of national income, so landlords would have to pay more tax. Anyway, none of that's happening anyway now. They found that the ONS that seem to just punch numbers in a calculator and see what comes out, they found that their model has come out a bit more optimistic than last time round. So, yay, there's less of a black hole. Oh, it's still about 30 billion. At least that means that there's less income tax that people over 40,000 or something need to pay. It's all just a bit of a mess, and now nobody really knows what's going on. And when that happened, gilts took a bit of a hit. The pound went down a bit compared to the dollar. Wasn't very good for any sort of economic outlook. And then the New Statesman came out with an article that said, "I can't believe the bond markets are in charge of us." That's going to happen when your debt is at 100% of GDP, though, isn't it? So I'd have a much more of a go at the people that put us in that mess, i.e. last 15 years or so, which is mostly Tories, yes, but then Labour don't exactly help and actually make things worse. So, in fact, the Tories are putting us on a slightly better route, really. So I will give them that. I'm not a total reform activist.
Well, see, you can get into the whole Liz Truss thing there. Where she thought that the bond markets, the gilt markets, would actually, support the country, rather than just act in each other's in their own interests. And she was wrong about that, and that's what we found, wasn't it? The reality was that it should have been the case that some of the reforms that she proposed, actually, if they'd been allowed to continue for more than 7 minutes, weeks, might actually have gone somewhere good, but that was not what was going to happen in that situation, and that was what she didn't see. That doesn't mean she was wrong. It just means that she did not see that one through in the reality of the scenario that there is.
Well, and in her scenario as well, you had the whole LDIs, or liability-driven investments. I'm going to have to go into the depths of my brain to remember what they are, which I don't think I can do for this podcast because they are very complicated. But basically, we don't have a problem with LDIs anymore that Liz Truss had. So actually, bond markets being above where Liz Truss was isn't actually a problem, or as much of a problem, I should say, anymore. Because it's something I keep bringing up. By the same economic metrics that everyone was using for Liz Truss crash the economy, we're actually in a worse position. But because the Bank of England hasn't put a load of money into liability-driven investments, which is what a lot of pensions will have gotten their money from, they've put it into more sensible investments now. It's not as bad for, obviously, people expecting pensions now or in a few years or what have you. So I suppose with that, at least she's in a better position. At least the taxes won't be as bad as we were expecting. But I think a lot of the news around it is there's going to be a smorgasbord, which people think is a bit of a dig at Torsten Bell, who's in the Treasury, given he's part Swedish, I think, because his idea is just have a very large amount of taxes that go up slightly. Problem with that, obviously, is that you then make an awful lot of small distortions in the market that could, given how vicarious everything is, crash things. And nobody seems to think that anything's actually going to get better, which I suppose is why the ONS found that a lot of people had left the country recently. But that's another issue. I'm just trying to work out how's the Treasury even running at this point. I don't particularly understand because everything seemed to move to number 10. You know, a load of staffers were poached by Starmer and McSweeney, so this is more their budget, I suppose, at this point. But keep an eye on it.
I guess what you have is, there's nothing particularly unusual about the fact that actually a lot of the budget gets run from inside the cabinet office, inside the HMRC. It certainly doesn't get run from number 10 or number 11. Basically, Downing Street gets told how much money it's got to spend and how much money it has to spend on various other things. So this is not particularly unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly when you have actually quite a well-oiled machine, I hear from inside, despite what you might say about McSweeney, that sort of thing, actually, the civil service machine is much more well-oiled when it is run by, or as it were, adjacent to people who have a similar world philosophy. Tends to work quite well, you see, because they're not arguing with each other about, oh, should have been more liberal, should have been more conservative. They all basically have the same worldview. So it's,
Well,
it's,
which is a shame, I'd say, because it's a worldview that seems to have put us down, as I said before, a track that was worse than where the Tories would have taken us. I mean, if reform didn't exist, I'd probably still, like a beaten housewife, still just gone back and voted Tories. I keep getting them mixed up, which is really bad. It's a good thing about recording my videos. I can always go back and fix that, but I can't with a kind of almost semi-live recording like this anyway. No, I mean, there was a big argument on Twitter I saw today, because half of the Twitter sphere seems to think that Starmer has no worldview. The other half seems to think actually he does have a worldview. It just sucks. I'm of the opinion that his worldview is effectively entirely based in the law, and I think this might even have appeared in his biography, where basically his worldview is just whatever the law says goes, even if it's a bad law, it has to be followed. And people like that, I mean, they don't really care about the economy, because he does seem to always struggle with economic questions. It does seem to like having Rachel Reeves there, but she also struggles with economic questions. Seems to be the issue there. But then, like with the Chinese spy case, any question on that, like the PMQs the week of the Chinese spy case he was really good. He had a really good performance there because he knows it inside out. Obviously, he was head of the CPS, but obviously he's not ever really had to touch economics, and he's come in when having a prime minister who's very good with economics would have been ideal. He's not really the man for that. And in fact, we're at a time where a lot of people seem to have an appetite for, well, burning human rights laws, for lack of a better term, getting out of the ECHR, for example, rolling back the Human Rights Act. So he's kind of the worst prime minister for this point that you probably could have picked from Labour. Having said that, with leadership challenges constantly coming up, I don't know who I'd prefer.
No, indeed. Well, I mean, look, it's one of those where, for some people, when they haven't got very much of a substance to them, it's going to turn into, okay, what crutch can I use? What can I rely upon that gives me some degree of substance that I can lean upon? And his is the law, because Starmer's, I should say, is the law, because he doesn't have anything else. So, and then we come to various other commentators who start using things like upstream and downstream. They say, oh well, so culture is downstream from law, or sometimes they say it the other way round.
Yeah.
Which just shows how confusing it is. Whereas what I would say is, I mean, I'm reminded of, if we're going to be Christian here, I'm reminded of the words of St. Paul, the analogy of the body, which is in the first book of Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 14 through 26, And what I would, just advise people to do is look at that, but then also to say, well, look, as I've said to a certain somebody before, you know, is my foot downstream from my hand? Is my arm upstream from my leg?
Mm.
And the reality is that no, it isn't. They're all part of the same thing. So when you have people saying, "Oh, this has caused that," or "This has caused that," or "This has caused that," it's not necessarily true.
Yeah,
You
it's. I mean, in online circles I was in a few years ago that thankfully I've left now. It was the idea of culture's downstream of law, and there are examples of that. It was law that everyone stays inside during COVID. That changed our culture, sure. But then the reaction to that, we ignored laws in the end, quite a lot of us, especially by the final lockdown. I mean, there were pubs I know that just they didn't even bother with the you need a Scotch egg with your drink for a substantial meal or whatever. They just didn't bother. So and then that influenced law. They just got rid of it, as a lot of governments do. They just get rid of laws that aren't followed anyway. And but then on the other hand, you've got the entirety of HR existing because of our Equality Act and what have you. But then even that's ignored by some people, and people want to get rid of it. So there's definitely a back and forth between that particular example, and I suppose the analogy you're going with is, well, it's all part of the same thing, and everything is downstream of something else, but it can also be vice versa depending on the situation. And
know,
sometimes they're just completely unrelated as well.
they can be unrelated, but sometimes it's the opposite. They are in fact reciprocal in the sense that they affect one another.
Yeah.
You see. So, I mean, I think that's what people who say this is upstream of that and that is downstream of the other. This is what they don't recognise is the reciprocal effect of different things affecting one another. You see, so we can end up in that situation where people don't fully perceive what the problem actually is because they're too busy focusing on one element of it.
And that's certainly happening as well on the right. I mean, there seems to be a bit of a pushback I'm seeing of people who only really have one or two things to say over and over, and will have any sort of, no matter what the conversation's about, they will bring something like immigration up. They will bring Islam into it. Even Douglas Murray does this a little bit, but he's a bit more smart about it and has plenty more to say actually. But people who seem to be coming in of the next generation, let's say, do certainly seem to be going down this road, which is a shame, I'd say, because I think there's a lot of people who can be a lot better than that. But then what's influencing them to stick to these topics and talk about them over and over, whether they be immigration or woke? I mean, one, they feel passionately about it, fair enough. But then, for example, Ben Shapiro the other day saying, "Oh, if you can't afford to live in New York City, then move." That's just advice as old as time. I mean, I've been reading Enoch Powell's biography by Simon Heffer. It's very good. But even he was saying in 1964, people move for jobs all the time. It's the most normal thing in the world. Perhaps we should actually help them. Like, even back in 1964, we had everyone's favourite right-wing politician, Enoch Powell, saying basically the same thing as Ben Shapiro, just a bit more nicely, I would add. But no, everyone went against it because, the issue with New York City and the housing there is immigration. No, it isn't. 500,000 immigrants, not immigrants, just people, it was US natives as well, left New York over the past 5 years. They've actually had demand side pressure released because of that. So, yeah. But they know it here, the issue is immigration, or at least part of it, therefore it applies everywhere. Well, it doesn't. And as to bring this back to Starmer and Rachel Reeves and all that, similar problem. It's almost ideological. Just human rights law, as long as that's good, everything else downstream of that will be good as well. I'm afraid it's not true. I'm afraid the world's very, very complicated, and you do need to have some high resolution lenses on if you are seriously going to try and deal with these issues, which I will say, I think Reform are doing. I think the Tories are trying to do, certainly, but they're only really able to talk about economics because it was the least worst part of their time in power. There's no way they can talk about immigration without people saying, why didn't you do anything about it? They can't really talk about green energy without people saying, why didn't you do anything about it? So, whereas at least with the economy, they have the whole, oh, we had to lock down the country, plausible deniability thing. So, but they do seem to have people on board trying to fix things from multiple angles. So I'd be quite excited really for 2029, unless we get an early election, and with the chaos that's coming in from Labour, that could even happen. Because as well, we're still getting open calls for leadership challenges. I mean, we said last week it's a matter of when, not if. And now Clive Lewis is saying, "Oh, I'll step down if Andy Burnham wants a seat," which I don't know if he's going to do or not. But it would be very funny to see Mr. Northern Andy Burnham take a seat in the South, because I think it's in Norwich, Clive Lewis's seat. And also, do the people of Norwich want Andy Burnham as their MP, or selected even from the Labour members there? Who knows? But people are desperate. That's what I'm getting from all this.
Well, as I say, the MP for my local constituency, when I'm not in London, I'm up in Cheshire. He was the MP there from the 2019 election until the 2024 election, when he moved to Battle and Bexley. Which is very much in the southeast. So it was more a case of saying it was a winnable seat. But you do sort of think, what is the you're literally, you want to be an MP, you want to have a winnable seat, you want to be able to stay in your seat if you're elected already, or if not, then you'll.
Sure, but I'd say it's a bit of a unique case with Andy Burnham, because he is very famously kind of Manchester man, even though he's from Liverpool. So going to the south, he won't have the same Malta's pull factor. But then again, there's no such thing as a safe seat anywhere in Manchester. So it's stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I don't think there's any chance he'll actually become an MP. Though when he was asked, will he take Clive Lewis's seat, there's one of those things of, I'm focusing on being the mayor of Manchester, blah blah blah. But he never said no. So he's probably open to it. And well, another question that I've seen people asking: what would he actually do different to Starmer? Because Starmer's in this position because he can't do anything he wants. They've run out of money to pay the public sector. They've run out of money for welfare. But they're the only two things that Burnham's really asking for. So what's he going to do when the bond markets say no? Complain? It's a funny one.
And this was Liz Truss's problem as well, that she thought she could tell the bond markets no, and then it turned out that actually they could tell her no. So we end up with a very similar scenario now. So what Starmer's doing is sort of like, I'm not going to try and play that game. I'm not going to try doing that. We've just seen how badly it went before. So we're not going to do that. So basically, we're going to do practically nothing. Because all I really wanted was to be in charge. I wanted to be in number 10, and now I am. And now I've got to do something. Well, I can't really think of anything in particular to do. So I'm just going to basically do nothing, but at least I'm in charge. I'm in power. That's kind of how it is.
Yeah, and it's quite funny because I've seen people say Starmer didn't even want the job. And I think I've said this on the podcast before. I'm not even sure he ever wanted to be an MP. I think he just wanted to be the Attorney General forever. And he's never been able to get that role because Labour never won until he was PM, and he only really seemed to go in for PM because everyone around him thought he'd be the best man for the job in, the Blue Labour side of things. Morgan McSweeney and is it Labour Together, the think tank he represents. So they just kind of picked a guy to be their head man, and now it seems that they're desperate to try and keep him there for as long as possible. Hence the whole try and throw Wes Streeting under the bus, and now Wes Streeting looks better. But then, as I said last week, isn't Wes Streeting the continuity candidate though? Wouldn't they be kind of okay with him replacing Starmer? It's such a confusing thing to look at from the outside. I don't even think people inside Labour understand what's going on. I'm certainly not getting that feeling from Times Radio, who have Labour people on all the time.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, so between Starmer and Streeting and Burnham, again, it's a continuity sort of just spectrum, really, of the same kinds of people who would do the same kinds of things. Of those, two, three, sorry, I think, yeah, Burnham might actually do something. I don't know whether what he would do would actually
So he'll be the
be.
worst option.
Yeah, well, there we go. I can't really think what Wes Keating would do as Prime Minister.
Mm.
The other thing that's interesting to speculate on, in terms of the three gentlemen, is what cabinet they would actually appoint and who would be in it. You see?
Yeah.
It's a bit difficult to see who would be all that different, really.
Well, exactly. I suppose that's the thing. I mean, will most of these people just want to keep their heads down, not support anyone in particular because they want to keep a job? Is it going to be a fight of the backbenchers, effectively? It's enough of them to have to have three candidates, I suppose, including Starmer. So they need 80 supporting them to actually be on the ballot. So it'll be a very, very interesting one, I think. But again, now the question is, will it happen after the budget or will it happen after the May elections?
It's thought the numbers are already there.
Yes, or at least one candidate anyway. Yeah.
Mm.
But then it's just a case of who do you pick, and that's where it's even quite funny listening to Times Radio because they said the same thing. Well, who are they going to pick? I don't know. It's because there's no good candidate. It could have been Angela Rayner, but she's out now because of the whole tax thing, stamp duty thing. Lucy Powell maybe, but she's just been elected deputy leader. I don't know if I don't see why that would stop her actually, but very very odd one, very odd.
Well, yeah, you can't really say much about. If Shabana Mahmood went for it, maybe. I mean,
people have been saying, "Oh, they're bigging up Shabana Mahmood to be PM," and I don't think so. I think they're bigging her up because the reform she's put through. There are actually some things in there that are newsworthy. They're missing the main part of that news though, which is effectively that there's a backdoor entry for refugees or what have you to go on a work and study visa. So, sure, you've got this whole indefinite leave to remain. You can only do that after 20 years as a refugee. All right, I guess that makes sense. I don't know how many places are necessarily unsafe for 20 years. I could imagine there's actually quite a few. Okay, where do they go? I guess they stay here. Well, indefinite leave to remain at that point. But then you've also got these work and study visa routes where when you're on them, how are you any different to a legal migrant? And then if that's happening, what's actually stopping these people from coming across the channel? Because they're still not really being deported. Okay, you've had a few go over to France, but they seem to be slowly coming back. They're now desperately trying to find another third country that it might even go back to Rwanda for all I know, which is very funny, and actually probably will have. Well, it was working when they announced it because there was a big spike in people coming over to try and get in before they started getting deported. And then others tried to move over to Ireland because they thought they were being deported from Britain. So it actually kind of was working if you look at the deterrent side of it. Or at least, migrants, illegal migrants, I should say, believed it would be an effective deterrent. So, but as I say, what's the point if you can just get on a work or study visa? I don't even really understand how you get a study visa if you come over illegally. Do you just apply to uni? Because who pays for the uni fees? Because they don't get any support. Well, I hope they don't get any support from our taxes anyway. So I don't really get that one, but the work one I can get.
You have to prove you have to prove your identity, so or your citizenship, or your
right,
your visa, your application to be able to work in or indeed study in the country. You do have to do that.
But then how many people are just going to allow you to have fake documents and
to blag it, basically.
And blag it, yeah, because we do have a black market of workers. It keeps being brought up about Turkish barbers and mini marts, I think they call them, where it's just that they're clearly just fronts for crime. but they'll hire whoever because they make the shop look busy. I mean, I mean, I've had this before. I went to Guildford a few years ago now for a friend's wedding, and I didn't get a haircut when I was at home, so I got one there. No one in the shop spoke English. They only took cash. It was only a couple of years later when I heard about Turkish barbers actually being quite famous fronts for criminal activity. I was like, oh, I probably just gave criminals some money. Because that was the other thing. It had like 3 reviews and they were all 5 stars. I mean, I'm never going in a shop like that again. The haircut was fine, by the way, but it doesn't bode well when the man says, I don't speak English, and you have to say to around the back and sides with like hand gestures and what have you. But again, the guy might have been illegal as well, for all I know. It's who knows. But having said that, Labour are trying to signal that they're coming after those types of things, but there's so many. I mean, they're not going to get all of them, I would imagine. I think it's going to be.
Well, they won't, because people disappear into the system.
Yes. Well, I suppose that's the other thing. What's stopping that from Shabab Mahmood's reforms? Nothing that I can see. I think the only good things were that refugee status is temporary. They're trying to find safe countries to deport them to. The Rwanda plan, basically. They can't get permanent settlement until 20 years, but then it's all kind of slung by this back door, and well, they can study and work, I suppose. Okay. Oh, and the big news obviously was they're taking jewellery, confiscating jewellery to help pay the costs of housing them. To which I just thought, well, I'll just hide the jewellery then. The other thing is that everyone said, I mean, I saw this from miles off. Like, obviously, you're going to invoke Auschwitz from that. Having been there myself, they make it pretty obvious that taking personal belongings from people when you move them or detain them is a big aspect of that. So I kind of can't believe that Labour even did that. And even at the Reform press conference, Zia Youssef made the point of, if Nigel Farage put forward that idea, you would be all over him like mad. But Shabab Mahmood got away with it, and nobody seems to care. But I
think it's fun because they think it's not actually going to happen.
I suppose that's the other thing. Yeah, I don't believe it's going to happen. I mean, they base it off Denmark. They've done it 17 times in 5 years. It basically never does happen. And I'm not being funny. How many videos do you see these people coming over with gold watches and gold chains, what have you? They don't have jewellery, most of them, from what I can see. Spent all of tattoos on guns on their face, at least according to one.
Well, in fairness to them, they've spent what, sort of £5,000 on average, wherever it is, on the people trafficking.
Well, that's probably the other thing. They've probably already given the jewellery to the people traffickers to pay for the damn travel. So
you wouldn't. My point being, you wouldn't expect to necessarily see that, but there's, it to be visible in that sense. But what you do know about all of these people is that they evidently had the money to get over here to begin with. I'm talking about the illegal, immigrants. Well, so look at me and how poor I am. You're not, or rather, now maybe you are, but you weren't before. You paid this money to these people, so there's no point expecting sympathy now. Why should you have it when you evidently, you didn't need it to begin with? I mean, that's even in northern France, which is quite expensive. That's enough to start saving up for a deposit on a house, or at least to get a rental property somewhere. There's something you can do with that kind of money that instead of spending it on trying to get to England, But with that said, do you then have the other element of that, which is, I mean, I recall this from about 10 years ago now. The BBC reported on this, and I can't really do this without doing the accent, but
I'll do the accent.
They were doing something. But if you go to England, they will give you a house. That kind of thing. Yeah. So that is definitely the sentiment. It's like, you get to England, you will get a house, and all of that, and it's all, well, yeah. Why should I stay in France when I can go and do this somewhere else?
That's the other thing. Surely your average person just sees this, thinks, but reform will just deport them as soon as they get here. That's preferable. I don't understand, because a lot of people, because even Reform were poking fun, saying, "Oh, she's being a Reform fangirl," and she kind of was, because it was a knockoff Nigel Farage, so to speak. And I saw a lot of people online saying, "Oh, why aren't you saying that it doesn't go far enough?" Well, in their press conference, they did quite a few times say, "This is all just bluster. The stuff that's good isn't going to happen." And then there's backdoor entries to work visas and what have you for, well, illegal migrants. That's why. just deport them as soon as they get here. That's our plan. It's very simple. It's probably even more affordable actually in the long run. And yet here we are trying to find more ways that we can look like we're doing something without really having any real plan of what to do. Having said that, some of the reforms I do like, sure, but it's all rug pulled by the work and study routes. I can't get that out of my head, despite how good it is that indefinite leave to remain for refugees is 20 years now, despite how good it is that it's the refugee status is also temporary and that they will be returned once it is deemed safe, and they're reviewed every 2.5 years. But my God, the Home Office now just greenlights a lot of people going through, at least if you believe Max Tempers and insiders that report to him. Imagine if the Home Office had to do it again every 2.5 years for every case they get through. It'd be crazy. Just be more green rubber stamping. They're not going to do that. So, because there is a capacity issue here. There's so many. There's been over capacity for ages. They've been keeping 5,000 extra dwellings that whole time too, in case they get 5,000 in a week or whatever. And then obviously when 1,000 come over in a week, they have to find 1,000 other spare beds. It's quite mad how much money has actually gone into this. We're talking 8 billion a year or something, and that's just for housing.
Don't we normally have, because normally if you look back in over the past, well, couple of decades, in fact more than that, the worry has been, but this is just keeping bums on seats. This is just creating jobs for the useless bureaucrats, to process all of these these applications, right? Now, the converse of that is, what if we just do it with AI?
Right.
Then you can see that.
You know what? I'm happy with replacing all of the civil service with AI.
I don't think it would necessarily be better. I think it would have its own different problems.
Oh, that, yeah.
So, but it certainly does give you an indication of, just how things can go wrong in one way or indeed another.
True, yeah. I mean, you're never going to get a perfect answer. I mean, I obviously jest when I say I want the whole thing replaced with AI, because then you ask, which AI? Because some are better than others. They'll have different parameters, what have you. But I'm at the moment, as they exist and as the civil service exists now, I think AI generally I could roll the dice with it, and I think be quite happy. But especially since I know for a fact a lot of them are using AI for their emails anyway. That's kind of half the job.
Yeah, it becomes a case of, and then it's almost like, have you ever had a conversation with someone where it is like an actual human, but it's like it is actually like talking to AI?
Yeah. I'm not being funny. That's always how it feels with Starmer. It does always feel like he's reading off a script, even when he's passionate on a passionate subject like the law. But I suppose you're always going to end up like that if you've been a lawyer, especially a human rights lawyer, for decades. You're just in that culture, I suppose, and especially when you're in court a lot. It's the way a lot of them act, especially with a lot of experience like that. But Starmer, I think, is a bit of a special breed on that.
Right, just professional virtue. It's turning virtue signaling into a specialism, into a profession, as it were, and that's basically how people like that operate. And you can instruct AI to do that, so it gives me no surprise at all that that's what you perceive about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's. I think you can say that with a few politicians as well. Actually, a few of them do seem like robots, but then you get the very animated ones, like well, the obvious one being Boris Johnson. But well, there we go. I mean, I can't. There's a few characters in Labour actually. I suppose I was going to say I can't think of many. I can actually think of a couple. Angela Rayner, obviously being a big one. A lot of people in Manchester like her, mainly from what I can tell. Oh, it's the way she says things. Basically, she has a very Manc accent. Um, but God, that's probably it though at the moment. I suppose I quite like some of the ex-Labour who go on GB News. Actually, they're quite good. And obviously Blair had an aura about him, I think we can say. But then he moved to Gordon Brown, who's very very droll and boring.
Well, I want to be people like Frank Field.
Oh, I don't recognise that name, I'm afraid.
You don't recognise Frank Field?
I don't know. Should I?
Yes, you should.
Oh, I should. Yeah. Sorry, I've just Googled. I know the face. Very old one.
Well, yes, but he was a very good MP.
Mm.
You see, he was very good at both the constituency level and at the parliamentary level.
Mm.
And I recall when they decided to remove the whip from him, and he then said, "Right, I'm going to sit as an independent Labour MP." And Southside turned around and said, "You can't do that." And he said, "Yes, I can. I'm Frank Field." And they were like, "Oh, okay, you."
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's exactly what he did, because he was a very respected and long-standing figure with a great history of good performances, you know, regardless of wherever the politics are that you agree with him on or not.
Mm.
You know, he was very good
Yeah.
at being an MP. Let's just put it like that, at being an MP.
Yeah, goodness me. He was Tory until 1960, then Labour for over 50 years, and then independent in 2018, as you say, and then he joined the Birkenhead Social Justice Party.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
which doesn't well, it might exist. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I always have to remind myself splits in politics happen all the time, so I have to be less wary of things like Advance and Restore. But
I mean, I've been a member of the Tory party. I've also been a member of the Labour Party. You know, so people go on journeys. You know, these things happen, and sometimes there's just commensurate with what they actually want to achieve. Other times, it's because they have a genuine sense of how they want to go in politics. You know, but anyway, so he's just a very good example of the fact that actually sometimes you can just turn around and stick two fingers up to the machine and say, I'm going to stand however the hell I want. Thank you very much indeed. And if you have enough standing, you can get away with that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
well, I suppose Rupert Lowe's kind of done that though. Having said that, it is. Well, as Camilla Tomley says on the Daily Tea, he's gone from Rupert Lowe to Hoopert Lowe. But well, we'll see. We'll see where he gets to anyway.
I mean, the thing is, he's only been in the House for a year.
Yeah.
Well, a year and a half ish now, and he's set up his own initiative. This Restore Britain thing, he set that up, but that's being run out of his office.
Yeah.
Just as, by the way, the thing that is now COVID action is actually run out of Diane Abbott's office.
Yes, that's
yeah, I have. So yeah,
it's well, I suppose that's politics.
Well, it is politics.
I wouldn't be shocked if Extinction Rebellion was run out of Caroline Lucas's office. To be honest with you, she was very involved with them.
Yeah, well, again, we can only speculate, but But yeah, it makes sense that it would be. But the point was to say he's only been in there for a year, over, a year and a bit, you know. And if Reform fields, because now he's an independent, if Reform fields a candidate against him at the next election, whenever that is,
Yeah.
he'll be out. So,
do you reckon? Because I think he's got a good relationship with the constituents. To be quite honest with you, I think he'll have a good chance of surviving that. Annoyingly, I would add. I mean, there's even talk that he might be. Well, he's on a Tory select committee seat actually. There's suspicions he might even join the Tories, which I think if he joins the Tories, he'll be out of Great Yarmouth. But if he stays an independent, I think he'll stick with it. And from everything I can tell, this whole Restore Britain, the rape gang inquiry, it's run out of his office, but he has kind of little involvement in it beyond being there for the PR stuff. I think he actually loves being a constituency MP. So I mean, if my money is on it, he'll run it as an independent, and then if he doesn't win, it will be close anyway to Reform, obviously. So it'll be an interesting one anyway.
Okay, well, and we don't even know when it's going to happen.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, even the Daily Telegraph's editor, political editor, I can't remember his name. He was just on the Daily T. Even he's predicting that there's going to be a 2027 election. I made a video saying that probably about 5 days after Labour got in, because I could see everything they're going to do is going to make things worse, and they're going to be stuck in a place of half them want to do one thing, the other half saying you can't because reality. And it's just going to cause a bit of a split to a point where you'll probably see no confidence in the government. But then someone pointed out to me, well, you'll have to have a lot of people voting for Christmas. Well, apparently you've got 80 MPs happy to throw Starmer under the bus. Once they've got a taste for that, think of the Tories. Once they got a taste for regicide, my God, it was every other week. So that could happen to Labour until you get to the point of this is too much for whoever's in charge. I'm just done. Like, let's have an election.
Well, I think, to be honest, that's what Rishi did.
Yes, yeah. Well,
just that I'm done with this. Let's have an election. I think I know what the result is going to be, but at least it'll be over.
They were saying that in the Daily Tea today as well. Rishi Sunak knew he wasn't going to win, and so things were unpopular. No, sorry, it was on Times Radio on how to win an election. Very open just about, right, let's just do unpopular things then. And that's actually part of the reason that they did the whole no cigarettes for anyone who was born after 2005 or whenever it was. They're 20 now, it won't be that. No, about 2008. Sorry, I forget how old I am. So, yeah, no, that's part of the reason he did that. And then what's Rishi Sunak when he's interviewed? Oh, what are you proud of? Oh, banning people from smoking. Okay. I guess if that's...
yeah, I mean, you're going in there, Theresa May, net zero by 2050, all that kind of thing. They all already, don't they?
Yeah, Boris Johnson, net zero stuff. Yeah. Which is just David Cameron, gay marriage. Just I find it quite amazing that of all these aren't typically conservative things to do, but that's what the Conservatives' proudest achievements are. And it's got to the point where the LGBT cons seem to be the biggest part of the Tory party, which, imagine saying that 20 years ago.
About 20 years ago, Giles Brandreth was saying this on Have I Got News for You? Well, that you pretty much have to be gay to be a Tory these days.
Well, fair point. Fair point. But all right, I'll go back a bit further then to Thatcher's time when they were bringing in Section 28.
Oh well, yes. No, that was not so popular.
No, it was not
so popular. But speaking of entryism,
oh yes,
you see, we have the notion at the moment. I've been paying quite a lot of attention to the Socialist Labour network, to the Democratic Socialist network, to the various other factions of this whole thing on the far left side of things. And All of them really. There's Labour Against the Witch Hunt and the Labour in Exile network. I mean, really, it is People's Front of Judea. Honestly, it is.
Well, yeah, as split as the right may be, I don't think it's as bad as the left.
Well, not the far left anyway. No, but
True.
now momentum's been very quiet lately.
Yeah.
But these more fringe movements on the far left, I mean, yes, well, we were talking about entries, and yes, they're all basically they're doing what they always do, talking about democracy. They're talking about this upcoming conference, the Your Party conference, which I believe is to be held on the 29th,
29th? I think it's a Saturday, yeah.
Yeah. And they're all going on about democracy, which is basically a way of saying we'd like to be in charge, please. That's
all
essentially
that means,
that's essentially how it works. And I could go back to my dad, who was also someone who infiltrated far left networks some 40 years ago. He said that's always how they do it. They use procedure, they use democracy, they use all that kind of thing. It's basically a way of saying we want to be in charge, please.
Yeah.
They're seeking a mandate, you see, for
my favorite quote. My favorite quotes from John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn's right hand man, who just when he was doing a speech just said, "Oh, we need more direct action. Don't like that word. I prefer to call it what it actually means: insurrection." It's like, yeah, but you're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud when you're on camera. I love using that clip whenever I bring up the Corbynites.
No, absolutely. This is the thing. They seek to create an impression that because there has been a vote and therefore there has been a mandate amongst a meeting of people that might only have been about 25 people. Therefore, there is now legitimacy for whatever it is that somebody who's actually in charge has proposed. You see, a motion or a notion or whatever. That's how they operate. That's how they've always operated. And what they now are doing is seeking to spread that degree of entryism into your party. Because now somebody's actually created a party and they've been they've spent the past 2 or 3 years trying to do exactly that, but now somebody has. And so then now they're attempting to essentially infiltrate it, but then they can't even agree with each other on what it is that they are supposed to be doing. They don't even know. I mean, you've even had, you had someone from the SLN who left them and then appropriated most of their funds and put them towards other leftist causes.
Incredible. I mean, it's almost like what happened at the top of your party, to be honest. Which is the funny thing to me. What's the point of doing entryism in a party that's already flat on its face and dead? Because let's face it, that's happened to your party. I think has 2 of the MPs left now. Was it just 1? Either way, if 1 falls, the rest of the dominoes will fall. Because I'm sorry, how can you have a leftist party that is effectively communist joining forces with people who are effectively socially conservative Muslim landlords? That doesn't make any sense. You can't have a progressive communist party with something that's basically the direct opposite of it. What's the reason they got together? They don't like whatever mainstream politics is, which is what at the moment? Neo-Blairism, maybe? I mean, just to put it more bluntly, they're basically people that don't like Britain, to be honest with you. So,
well, it isn't so much not liking Britain. It's not liking the West.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, and so therefore, why do we have all these other ones who are sort of just basically anti-Israel, for example?
Yeah.
And pro-Palestine. You know, we had people saying at their election victories, "Oh, this is for Gaza," you know, all of that. Yeah, they don't like the West. You know, there are some people whose politics is basically being anti-establishment sort of to the max. So anything at all
Mm.
that is seen as being pro or positive to not just this country, but the
Tainted, yeah.
entire Western civilization, which it is, you know, anything at all that is pro that, well, we're anti that. That's why you keep seeing the same kinds of people, the ones who go on about the climate just because they want
Mm.
to cripple the West economy, the ones who keep going on about Palestine just because they want to cripple Israel, you know, and you keep seeing the same sorts of people turning up in the same kinds of group chats. You see the same kinds of stuff going on time after time after time, and after a while, you kind of spot the pattern,
Yes.
and the pattern is anything that is against your own society, you want to cripple. Anything that is pro, or at least should be, which is not to say it always gets it right, but is should be pro your society, you hate.
Yes. Yeah,
You know, it
which is just such a. How do we have such big cohorts of this at the moment? I mean, we might have always. I mean, we've certainly had them in George Orwell's time. He wrote about the intellectuals who, would rather be caught with a hand in the poor box than standing up for God Save the King.
mm,
So they must have always existed, but it's interesting how it only seemed to occur after World War II, or at least in the interwar period. I can't remember when he wrote Road to Wigan Pier. That's a very good book, actually. Makes me glad I'm not a coal
well,
miner.
hang on. To be fair with that one, we
Yeah.
have, you know, why did, you know, how did we get the terms left and right in politics? Do you know?
Well, we nicked off the French, didn't we?
Well, we did
Yeah.
because there was the French Revolution, and that goes back to 1789 when you had,
True, yeah.
you know, the people who were in support of the king and the current
Status.
consensus, shall we say,
Yes.
go with on the
Status
right,
quo, yeah.
and the ones who, yes, the status quo, yes, and the
Mm.
ones who were against that, they were on the left. In the
Mm.
in the Parliamentary Hall.
Yeah, and what a fine
Um,
mess France has been ever since.
yeah, well, my point being, actually, this concept is not new.
No, it's not. Uh,
Um,
yeah, well, I suppose. I think when it was put in a British sense, I mean, obviously the right wing were the Tories, who were landowners and lords and pro. I mean, even before that, Roundheads and Cavaliers. You can easily say who was left and right wing there, even though Oliver Cromwell banned mince pies and Christmas and all that. Fun. Generally, these days we think the left are anti-fun and the right are pro-fun, but then, well, push comes to shove, there's a few righties that don't want any fun from the looks of it. But and they're anti-intellectual as well, which is interesting because I don't think they were back in the 1700s, uh, especially when the church had most of the say on things and had a monopoly on the intelligentsia effectively. But then you secularize it, and then suddenly the left, well, not suddenly, but over centuries, the left take over. It's a funny one,
well,
really.
it's become its own religion, really, hasn't it? You
Oh
know,
yeah,
when you take away a moral framework that, you know, like it or lump it, had in fact been, you know, a large part of creating a framework by which people could live their lives and evaluate, you know, decisions, you know, as to what was right, what was wrong, and then you suddenly, or in societal terms, quite suddenly, really get rid of that, but you don't really have anything to replace it with. Well, then you end up with something else that will replace it. And when we look at wokery, when we look at, you know, all of that kind of thing, well, it's just the next religion. It's just the next kind of, for people who seem to feel the need for a moral framework for that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Some of us kind of think we can do it for ourselves, but a lot of people, and really most people, don't think they can do it for themselves. So then you end up with people who need to be a bit of a sheep towards something or other, and okay, I will just follow that. Oh, now that's gone. Oh, but now there's this.
and that.
You
Well,
know,
I think they did the studies on it of who are the most likely type of people to be woke, and they had the lowest verbal IQ, I think.
mhm.
And it's like you say, it's they are sheep because unfortunately there are people that literally can't lead and have to be followers. It's not that they can't ever be useful. That's not the point. But the point is that very intelligent people who are leaders can probably make their own morality and not make it too bad. I think it's still best for everyone that everyone follows largely the same moral framework, and I think the Christian one, obviously I'm biased here, is probably one of the better ones though. But then you get into the
Well,
problem is it Baptist, Methodist, Anglican, blah blah blah.
but I've been all of those. Seriously, actually, yeah.
Wow.
Never been Catholic though.
Oh, save the best till last.
Well, so although I do like their services, we get some of the churches in London where the entire service is in Latin, and to be fair, yeah, I taught myself Latin at school when I was 14,
Nice.
because they didn't teach it, so I did that, and yeah, I did get beaten up a lot. I was that lot. I was that lot, honestly. No, it's quite enough. But and this is the thing, you if you haven't got one, you're going to try to invent one, and that's basically for a lot of people would say that's the kind of the point of religion
Yeah,
is to
kind
do
of.
that,
Yeah.
and it isn't just about having the traditions, Easter, Christmas, you know, all that kind of thing. It isn't about just that. It's about having that which binds us all together. That was always the point of it. And for people who want to disrupt that, which doesn't mean, oh, if you don't want to believe, you don't have to believe. But when you rip something out of the core of a society, and like I said, you don't have something to replace it with, you're going to end up with this sort of nascent thing. Everybody knows what it is. It's a thing that's growing up, and it acts like something that's growing up, like an adolescent, like a teenager, because it can't. It's not old enough yet to have established itself properly. So you are going to see this kind of movement going on, and these kinds of things are represented very easily in the likes of, I have to say, Rebecca Long Bailey, Zach Polanski, Emily
yes.
Thornberry, those kinds of people for whom this is how they view morality, because they don't have a way of properly viewing morality.
Well, I'd almost argue it's the same with Starmer. What's his morality?
Yes.
Law. The word of the law is law. Oddly enough, but yeah, whatever the law says goes effectively, which is so odd when you are literally a lawmaker. Laws obviously derive from elsewhere. Yeah, I suppose you can just make some out of complete thin air, but there you go. And we obviously have this on the right. It's just the thing with the right. Well, with Tory MPs, we obviously call these people NPC types, but they tended to just lean left anyway as well, which is quite funny. But now I think we were almost through the looking glass of some people trying to go more right wing in a bit of an NPC way. I think I mentioned it last week. I think Katie Lamb would be one of my examples of this, where she was a Spads Boris Johnson, and who was the other one? Who's the Home Secretary? Suella Braverman. Don't really know the details of her work, so I'll be fair here. But seeing her go on about immigration, because that's obviously the in thing that makes you cool these days, she doesn't really seem to know what she's talking about with it. She seems to just bleat platitudes, is the best way I can put it. Doesn't really understand what her point should be when push comes to shove on it. And I think that's happening more and more. I think that is happening a bit with Robert Jenrick, but I think his is a bit more genuine because I think his daughter's got hassled. But I think it might have been worse than hassled in London when the October 7th celebrations were going on. So, but even then, I just don't see people really buying it. Whereas obviously, when it comes to Nigel Farage, I think it's a bit difficult to say he's an NPC type, for example. But then again, I think it's quite difficult to say Boris Johnson's an NPC type. He also went against the grain, and did seem at least to know what he's talking about. But then again, it's difficult to say if someone's just acting very well in that case. So,
well, it's the thing is, I may have said this before, but if you take 20 people and you put them in a room, and to be honest, you can tell them one of two things, really. You can either tell them that they cannot escape,
mm.
or that they must escape. It doesn't really matter which way round you do it. And what will happen is, of those 20 people, 2, maybe 3, will emerge as leaders.
Mm.
Said leaders will then appoint 2, maybe 3 acolytes. That's what I like to call them, or lieutenants.
Disciples, if you want to stick Christian.
Yeah, disciples. Yep. To that, in terms of whatever approach they've come up with, is how the hell do we get out of this route?
Mm.
Yeah. Assuming they are different approaches. Everyone else will just be a sheep and will go along with. You see, so that's about half the room that's left. That will just go along with whoever they
follow
think.
the leader. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I will follow the leader that you choose.
Yes.
Okay. So statistically speaking, I say 20. You could make it a bit larger, maybe a couple of dozen, something like that. 24. That is what is likely to happen. So when we then look at this situation, if we apply that principle, which is pretty likely, some people, when they're in that situation, suddenly find for the first time that they actually know how to lead. But broadly speaking, no. Out of my own personality type, look, you can look at this as being like it's like in an old western. You have the sheriff.
Oh, aye.
And then you have the deputy.
Yes.
And that's the acolyte. That's the lieutenant. That's and that is my personality type. I'm more suited to being deputy something than being a leader.
Being told the instructions to give to a bigger mass of people, I suppose, is
it's sort of I'm definitely not one of the sheep.
Not a sheep, but also not a lion, maybe.
And I can do leadership, but I'm best off being the acolyte that's somewhere in between. Okay.
Fair enough.
And I think you have in politics at the moment, just now we have some people a bit like that, and I think when we look at Katie Lamb, for example, I'm sort of seeing that.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, she definitely seems to be the replacement for Jenrick. She seems to be the next, almost possibly leader in waiting at this point. I mean, I did see William Atkinson, who seems to be almost the Zoomer mouthpiece, the Zoomer activist everyone keeps an eye on to see where the Zoomers are at in the Tories. He put out a meme today that is riffing on one he made a year ago called the Sensitive Young Man Starter Kit. It's just a load of things that he's into, basically. But last year it was Jenrick for leader. This year, for the same style of meme, it was Katie Lamb. So within a year, they've switched from Jenrick's going to be the replacement for Kemi. Kemi sucks to Kemi still sucks, but Jenrick's not going anywhere. Let's go to Lamb instead. And I think this is what's going to happen with Labour as well. They'll pick a leader. It won't be very good. They'll go straight to the next one. I mean, they've kind of already done that. Angela Rayner doesn't seem likely to be lead at this point in time, but of course we will see. So again, it's just been another completely turbulent week in politics, and we didn't even talk about the fact that an ex-Labour MP's moved over to the Greens, and they're growing and surging, and all because basically just because Zach Polanski's got a big megaphone to shout things that the Greens were already saying, but a bit louder. Literally just being louder seems to work for the left wing. It's a bit of a shame because there's absolutely nothing new intellectually that he's bringing forward at all. It's just the other side are racists. We want less billionaires. Great, thanks, Zach.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Labour used to be able to get away with just saying that. I mean, yeah. I remember now. Who was it? I can't remember. It was one of them that was on the shadow front bench prior to the 2019 election, saying, "Well, there shouldn't be any billionaires in Britain." Now she said that live on air. You know,
yeah.
Honestly, can't remember which one it was. It could have been any of them. Actually, I think it was Richard Bergen, but I could be wrong about that. So don't quote me on that. But it was just one of those where it's just like, if that is actually what you think, if you think there should actually be a cap on people's ambition, and yet you campaign as the party of the working people,
yeah.
You know, it's just it's just unbelievable that this is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, that's always a front. They've always been welfareists. They have been since Clement Attlee. It's been every time Labour's got in, it's been horrible. It's no surprise this time round it's horrible too. The only reason Blair got so far is because we had Thatcherism for 20 years before it. I've said it in a previous podcast. Like, nobody thanks Thatcher and Major for the fact that we actually did manage to have about 10 pretty good years under Labour. Wouldn't have happened without that. It'd be like we have it today. It sucks, I'm afraid to say.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you look at all those previous PMs, I mean, Thatcher, she had, you just go from 79 onwards. From Thatcher, we had the Falklands to deal with. We had the monetary crisis to deal with. We had trade unionism getting very excessive to deal with. Winter discontent and all that.
Yeah.
Now then we then we had the ERM stuff, and then and crashing out of that, then we had Major, and he had Sleaze basically to deal with amongst his own government, which back then was actually viewed quite badly, whereas by today it's sort of like, yeah, of course they're all villains. But back then that was not the way. Then you have Blair, so let's just skip Blair. Then you have, because I'll come back to him, then you have Brown. Now, Brown had, a massive financial crisis to deal with. Not just a national one, but an international one. And then you had Cameron, and he had, firstly, governing in coalition, but also dealing with Labour's financial mess.
Yeah.
To deal with, and not knowing whether they were going to be in power beyond the next 5 years. And then he got another majority of about 12, and then held a referendum, which Nigel Farage forced him into, and then lost it. And then resigned at about 8:30, I think it was, the next morning.
Which we've said before was a good move from him.
Yes, we did. Yeah. So there we go. And then we have, so he bowed out, which is a nice way of putting it. And then we have May, who had Brexit to deal with and couldn't.
Yeah.
And then we had Boris, who had Brexit to deal with and could, but then had COVID to deal with and couldn't. Or rather, wasn't allowed to by the press. Okay. And then we had Truss, who tried her best, but so that didn't work. And now, we've had Sunak, who didn't really know what to do. Not much. And then we've had Starmer. Now, of all of that, I said earlier, didn't I? I said skip Blair. Because out of all of those people, he didn't really have anything to deal with.
So,
Some people.
Blair, yeah.
Well, Blair. Some people might argue Iraq, but
Well,
actually, 3 million people came out on the streets to protest against that, and nothing happened. Okay, there was the Chilcot inquiry into that, but that didn't come out until 2015, i.e., way after he was still in office. So he lasted 10 years as PM, basically because he didn't really have anything in particular to deal with. Not really.
no.
That's why he was able to put his time into putting things together like the Supreme Court,
Human Rights Act,
Human Rights
malicious
Act,
communicate, yeah.
and allowing his then Chancellor Gordon Brown to sell off the gold in the mid-noughties, that kind of thing. No, he did that when he was Chancellor. Okay. Was about 2005, or something like that.
Yeah.
But my point being, what actual major crisis? This is what I've just been running through. What actual major crisis did he ever actually have to deal with when Blair, when he was actually a prime minister?
Well, it was one of his own making, Iraq, which
yes, but that didn't damage him politically at the time.
No, I mean,
not when he was actually still in office.
He
spent 6 weeks announcing his resignation and going on a resignation tour. I think there's Trump would have liked to be able to have had anything like that. I remember watching Have I Got News for You at that time when it was I remember who was hosting it. I think it was Kirsty Young saying, somebody who's spent X amount of time announcing their resignation, and the Prime Minister has spent 6 weeks, announcing his, is continuing to announce his.
Yeah.
Because he basically, it was a tour of I'm sobbing off. But how many PMs in that period that I've just covered, from 1979 onwards, have been able to have the luxury of spending weeks and weeks and weeks saying, I'm starting off. Yeah. And by the way, we already know who the next PM is going to be, because there was an agreement between us. Sorry, no, not that there was, but there was. So, he is the only one out of all of those PMs who has actually been able to sod off with some dignity, which, if you're of my political persuasion, is quite annoying.
Well, I'm mine as well, yeah.
Yeah, but the reality is, of those 10 years, I mean, yes, there was what led to the run up to the financial crisis, which I think he probably had an idea of, and probably buggered off for that reason. Someone else's problem, especially if it's your own former chancellor. But there was the whole Iraq thing, but in his mind, you just blame America, and it didn't harm him in the polls at the time. People, he was re-elected after Iraq. People forget this. He was re-elected. Yeah. He was re-elected after Iraq with another big majority. Okay. Now, 10 years after that, yes, that would have harmed him politically, but he was out of office by then, so it didn't matter.
Okay. He had the easiest ride, really, yeah.
Well, he did, and that is the point. He had 10 years as PM, which is huge. I mean, who was the last person who had 10 years as PM? Well, Thatcher was, 11.
And she earned it.
She earned it, but then she was brought down. Okay, but
by her own party as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
But he basically got 10 years where he was able to do pretty much whatever he liked. He could get re-elected whenever he wanted. He had a parliamentary majority that was pretty huge, and nothing really happened other than sucking up to George Bush. Okay, which, as I say,
Oh, which is
wasn't.
that's very funny though, isn't it? Because Starmer's doing that, sucking up to someone you wouldn't expect him to, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That's a funny
Okay.
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, the point is
Sorry.
that didn't damage Blair at the time. People at the time, people saw it. They
Mm-hmm.
saw it for what it was, but the fact that they protested against it wasn't going to make any difference to anything at all. And he still got re-elected after that. It wasn't until 20, I think it was 14, 15, something like that, when when the report came out, that people basically were able to say, yes, he lied. But at the time,
Great.
those 10 years from 97 to '07, who was actually prime minister, nothing actually happened that was a particular problem,
Mm.
for him to deal with. Everyone else, like I say, you know, like I say, Thatcher had the unions to deal with, plus Argentina. Major had the RM crisis, plus Sleaze. Skip Blair. Gordon Brown had financial
Financial. Yeah.
crisis, which is partially of his own making. And yes, I did just say that, and you can quote me on that. Then Cameron has coalition plus massive economic problems to deal with. May then has Brexit. You know, Boris then has COVID to deal with. They've all had something to deal with.
Mm.
Now Starmer gets in, and his best excuse is, oh, there's this budget black hole. No, that's because you
That's you.
wanted to bung the unions some money. That's why you think there's a black hole. Plus, I mean, to be honest, look at the economy you're inheriting. I mean,
Yeah, it's
the
not
Conservatives.
great.
Well, no, of course it's not great because the Conservatives thought they were spending the past 10 years fixing the economy. The reality is they've spaffed 400 billion up the wall since then, spending, paying people not to work. So I don't know I don't know what you thought that was going to do interest rates. I don't know what you thought that was going to do to overall economic stability. But, you know, so yes, he's got his own problems to deal with. But my point is quite simply to say that Blair, why was he PM for 10 years? Well, one, because he was very good at fooling the country into thinking he was credible. That was his main skill. And two, because he didn't really have anything of the likes to deal with. I mean, Liz Truss, for everything else you say about her, I mean, the Queen died 2 years sorry, 2 days.
2 years. Oh my god! I wish she was in Parliament for that long. Yeah.
2 days
Yes.
into her premiership. And I thought
Yeah.
she did a very good job actually at the funeral of looking prime ministerial,
Yeah.
with that. But my point being, she gets in, the Queen dies 2 days later. This is someone who's been on the throne for most people's living memory,
Yeah.
and you've just become the prime minister. Oh my,
You
oh
just
my,
you shook hands with her 2 days ago in Balmoral,
yeah,
or a day
yeah.
ago actually. Yeah. It's yeah.
You see, so
Mm.
they've all had their own stuff
Mm.
to deal with, you know, except Blair, who didn't really.
Very lucky. What can yeah? When you're gonna get another prime minister like that? My prediction: it's after 10 years of reform, when they fixed everything. Imagine if it's Zach Polanski. Imagine him with an easy ride as PM. Goodness me.
Well, I think we have what can only be described as ULEZ Pro.
Well, quite. Oh, I mean, yeah. One thing I know about this decade, as I keep calling it the clown decade, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But with any luck, things will start to look more cheery if we get an early election. But we'll see about that. For now, everyone's plan seems to be see how it goes or plan to leave. I know people who don't have a passport who have a backup plan of leaving the country. That's how bad it's got. But well, we'll see how it goes. But I think with that, we'll leave it on that cheery note. I'd like to thank Patrick for sticking about for this episode.
Well, I've stuck around as long as I can.
Right. Well, we will leave it there then. So, thank you all very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.